Hello and welcome to the SEPM Distinguished Scientist Series. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Alan Carroll, who is the recipient of the 2025 Pettijohn Medal for Excellence in Sedimentology, which recognizes those who have made outstanding contributions in this field. I'm Megan Gorley, an undergraduate student at Texas Tech University. I'm just going to interview Dr. Alan Carroll on a couple, discussing his kind of background in geology and everything. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How you doing today, Megan?
I'm doing pretty well. In like 5 minutes or less, could you summarize your path to the geosciences for me?
Yeah, well, if I had to summarize it in one word, I was thinking about this the other day, it would be crooked. I went back and forth between academics and industry several times, and my interest kind of evolved over that period of time, which I think is pretty normal for career
Hmm.
development. And for the first geology I ever had was junior year in college. Actually, I took my first geology course and decided to switch from accounting to geology, and it was quite a scramble. I got done with that. I got a job for about 6 months with a mineral exploration company, prospecting for uranium in Nevada, and then went on for a master's in sedimentology at University of Michigan, looking at old at Holocene lake deposits. From there, I had a job for 3 years at Ohio Petroleum as an exploration geologist. Ohio is a company that's now just part of BP.
Hmm.
And after that, I went back to school again for PhD, this time working in sedimentary basins in Western China, tectonic sedimentation. And then finally came to Wisconsin about 29 years ago, I think. And for the last couple of years of that, I've been emeritus, which means I'm retired, but still active, just focusing on the fun parts of the job.
Yeah. Thank you. What are you most proud of in your career?
I think the thing that gives me the most satisfaction actually is mentoring.
Hmm.
Initially at the student level, and then further along, actually, as I got older and more senior in the department, mentoring of junior faculty members, and I think that's important. It gives a feeling of having done something worthwhile for your community. I think, and it really kind of is what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. Um, have you encountered any challenges or setbacks that turned out to be valuable experiences?
Yeah, I think everybody has setbacks and challenges. In my case, probably the most noteworthy was making the transition from my PhD program, or excuse me, from Exxon's research lab back to academia,
Hmm.
and to very different environments. Basically, it's academics is much more of a sink or swim kind of environment. Here, publish or perish, which is pretty much true.
Hmm.
And it's much less of a sort of a team effort. I would say it's you have your own little group that you work with, but you're sort of in competition with the rest of the world. Whereas
Hmm.
in industry, I've always felt I was part of a team, and I enjoyed that
Yeah.
feeling. So it took a little while to overcome that, I think.
Hmm. What are some things that you kind of learned from the experience of switching from industry to academia?
Well, I
Like in
think
terms of,
it made me more self-reliant, and I the model I often think about for academics is an antiques mall. Basically,
Mhm.
you don't actually work for the mall. You just rent a booth out, and those booths are like departments or research programs, and you have to kind of find your own way. Basically, you have to decide
Mhm.
what to do and how to do it and how to get funding and all those sorts of things. So I think it expanded my abilities in that regard, and I think. It also has been nice in terms of flexibility of research. You can do what you want, basically, provided you can fund it.
If you could go back in time, is there anything that you would do differently?
Well, there's two things come to mind. One is would have liked to have lived in the mountains, but unfortunately, it didn't kind of pan out that way. Wisconsin's pretty good.
Yeah.
And my other sort of dream job was to become an astronaut. And I actually interviewed a couple times with NASA and to be mission specialist. And didn't quite make it, but it was very
Mhm.
interesting.
Um, how do you manage your time and maintain work-life balance?
So this is an interesting question. So my wife is also a recently retired professor in engineering, and from time to time, because of the fact that we were a married couple and both professors, we would be asked, "Would you come to a panel on how to maintain work-life balance?" And our response usually was to break out in laughter and say, "Yeah, well, sure, we can make this something up." But it's a challenge. I think for me, the big thing is having outside interest to keep you kind of occupied.
Hmm.
And in my case, I'm an airplane pilot, and I actually built my own airplane from a kid. And
Wow.
it took me about 8 years or so to do that. And the nice thing about that is it was a distraction from all the other pressures of the job and kind of helped maintain sanity.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. Um, do you have any unexpected skills that have helped you to be essential at your job? Like something that you didn't anticipate would be an asset.
Right. I think writing is the one that kind of falls most into that category. My undergraduate at a small college and put a big emphasis on writing skills, which at the time seemed a little over the top sometimes. But I think what I've found since then is that writing is a way of thinking, basically. It organizes your
Hmm.
thoughts and leads you in directions you might not have otherwise thought of going. And so you use it for writing proposals, you use it for writing letters of recommendation, you use it for writing journal papers. If you're in industry, you use it for writing reports and things
Hmm.
like that as well. So it's pretty much a universal skill.
Yeah. Are there days that you don't want to go to work, or do you always enjoy what you do when you were working?
Sure. Well, I think everybody has kind of ups and downs. And I know in the graduate school realm, when I was back doing my PhD, there's always kind of this. It's a long time for a PhD. It might be 4 or 5 years, and inevitably during that 4 or 5 years, there comes a time when you feel a little bit down about it, and maybe you've begun to hate your advisor and wish you had never done this before, and those sorts of things. But the
Hmm.
trick is basically to persevere and hold on to the idea that there's something good at the end and that things will kind of work out in the long run. And I've
Hmm.
never regretted the path that I've taken. I think there have been times when I wish the details worked out a little differently, but
Yeah.
generally I've got a very sort of positive view of the whole thing.
Hmm. Um, was there a particular reason for your switch from industry back into academia? Could you tell me more about that?
Well, always had kind of a interest in being a professor, and
Hmm.
I think partly because of just general interest in science. And also, kind of going back in my family, my dad was a family doctor, and
Yeah.
he used to walk down the street, and people would say, "How you doing, Dr. Carroll?" and that sort of thing. And he was recognized in the community for having done something, kind of positive, in addition to just making money. And the being a professor is kind of like that. You basically have the ability to help other people in your job and feel like you're part of the community.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, could you tell me about some like I'd say pros and cons in both academia and industry and like how they're different from each other in your experience?
Sure, yeah. Well, as I kind of mentioned before, the industry job is very much kind of a team effort. You basically working together much more, and you share the luxury of a boss that you can blame everything on if it doesn't go right. And at kind of the worker bee level, you don't worry as much about the big decisions. Um,
Right.
Obviously, the money's better in industry, and although it's gotten a little bit harder to get jobs in recent years, I think the academic side of things, as I mentioned, is much more sort of driven by individual achievement, and that took me a while
Hmm.
to kind of get used to. That you have to kind of make your own way through the world, so to speak.
Yeah. Um, in your opinion, how has the geoscience field changed over the years?
It's changed a lot. I think when I was an undergrad student in the 70s, the big emphasis was on extractive industries and
Hmm.
minerals and petroleum. And I went to school up in Minnesota, so we didn't talk too much about petroleum, but minerals was a big thing. And the The accepted reality in petroleum geology at that time was the U.S. was running out of oil, and soon the world would be running out of oil, and we know how that's kind of worked out. It obviously hasn't run out, and the I forgot what. Okay, what was the original question?
How has the field changed over the
Oh, change,
years?
right? Yeah. So I think there was a very obvious migration through the 80s into more environmental fields,
Hmm.
water and pollution and things like that, and a lot of which was actually dealing with the consequences of fossil fuel use and petroleum production. And
Hmm.
the other kind of big change that's happened, I think, is a much bigger emphasis on computational geology models, simulations. And so field
Hmm.
work is still there, but it's not as prominent as it
Right.
was 30 years ago.
Hmm. Uh, for someone like entering to this field that changes so often, how do you recommend that someone go about like adapting or staying like relevant and involved?
Well, I think if you're in industry, one of the things I always tell my students is don't rely on your company being the whole world. Basically,
Hmm.
make sure that you're participating in outside activities, societies, things like that, and keeping a set of contacts that's outside of the company to provide more opportunities. And
Hmm.
I've seen several bad times in the petroleum industry where it's always a boom and bust business, and when the busts come, people get laid off, and they're fairly businesslike about it. There's no hesitation usually. I think the trick is to have those outside interests and contacts. And generally speaking, most of the people I know that have been laid off ultimately did pretty well for themselves, but they did it by being adaptable and being able to change, let's say.
Hmm. How do you see geoscience and research evolving in the coming years?
Well, I think it's kind of back to the future in a way, or I'm not sure if I got that phrase the right way around, but I think minerals are growing again,
Yeah.
and after a very long period of decades where they weren't. And I think the nature of being a geologist will change. I think developing mines and finding resources will be certainly a part of it. I
Hmm.
think there's going to be more emphasis on dealing with the consequences of energy use as well. And for people in petroleum geology, that one of the areas for that possibly may be carbon capture and storage, which is, if you think about it, petroleum geology in reverse, basically, you need all the same skills and the same subsurface geological imaging and analysis. And so I think that there'll be jobs in that. Even things like deep geothermal, basically,
Hmm.
not the kind where you're in California and the hot rocks are right at the surface, but the kind where you're in the mid-continent and you have to drill deep wells to get to it. One of the keys to making that work is actually fracking. And
Hmm.
they don't like to use the word fracking because it's got
Yeah.
connotations, but that's kind of what they're doing basically is trying to increase the surface area of
Hmm.
fracture that are in contact with the hot rocks. So I think my sense is it's going to go back in that direction. Um, what might be different is that in sort of classic petroleum geology, historically it's always been driven by a relatively small number of very large provinces, and
Hmm.
discovery is kind of like a treasure hunt. They're hard to find, but
Yeah.
once you found them, they're richly rewarding. I think with minerals, there's less mystery about where they are and more mystery about how to commercially exploit them. So I think that'll be
Hmm.
kind of the trend in the future.
Yeah. If you were to say like go, if you were to go back into work or research oriented industry, which of these fields would you find most interesting to go back into?
That's a good question. I think probably since I started off with minerals, I'd probably go back to that. I think
Yeah.
there's kind of a prospecting sense to that you don't get in geology anymore. I was actually boots on the ground, walking through the field, trying to
Hmm.
find these deposits, and um, I kind of found that rewarding. And I think it would be interesting just to see what we can do to substitute for petroleum production in terms of energy
Hmm.
sources. Because the one thing that is pretty obvious going into the future is we're not going to see a reduction in the use of energy, and
Right.
it seems it's actually accelerating in recent years, and so somehow it's going to have to be dealt with.
So you really enjoy that kind of like you said boots on the ground, hands-on, involved aspect of
I do
mineralogy, and
actually.
that's
Yeah, I think to me, I feel more like a geologist. And
yeah,
there's a saying I tell the students all the time, which is the confidence of your interpretation increases with distance from the outcrop. And
yeah,
the farther away you get from the rocks, the more you are likely to spin up some crazy theory that doesn't actually stand up.
yeah. Um, do you think that geoscientists are doing a good job at outreach to non-geoscientists?
It's getting better.
Hmm.
Many times in my earlier career, I said somebody tells me I'm a geologist. Tell them I was a geologist, and they would say, "Oh, how long have you been in archaeology?" And
Yeah.
that still happens occasionally. I think it's improved a lot at K through 12 teaching levels, um, and also at universities. I think I don't think I knew what a geologist was until I was already in college, and so it was kind of hard for me to get too far ahead in it. So I think that's I forget what the original question was on that one again. I kind of wandered.
No, you did a great job at
Okay.
answering that. As kind of a follow-up, do you find that there can be like conflict perhaps between geologists and non-geologists, like engineers, especially like in the work environment?
There's always conflict between geologists and engineers in the work environment. I'm being facetious. I'm many good friends married to an engineer, so I can't say too much. Um, the standard joke, though, used to be not the joke exactly, but the standard understanding and when I was in petroleum exploration is the geologist was always wildly optimistic, and
Mhm.
the engineer was wildly pessimistic, and we basically didn't think anything could ever produce oil, and so you had to
Yeah.
find some kind of a happy medium in between.
Hmm. Do you ever have a hard time kind of navigating that balance?
Not especially. I think again the kind of team focus tends to overcome
Hmm.
that. You're all working on the same side.
Yeah. What do you think we can do better about outreaching to non-geoscientists, whether that be like in K through 12 or in universities or higher up?
Right. Well, in the university, I think it would be good to have more time to try to reach the public for outreach. So my favorite example of this is I wrote a book about 10 years ago on energy resources, and I was glad to do it, and I was happy with the outcome, and it's been a good book. But I got zero time off for doing that as part of my job, if you see what I'm saying. So it did not count, in other words, towards my publisher parish because it was not a scientific journal paper. It was more of a public outreach kind of effort. So I think more importance could be attached to outreach activities and reaching the public, and
Mhm.
I think we're heading in that direction. I think it's still a little ways to go.
Um, with challenges in securing job opportunities, why should one consider a career in geosciences today?
Well, I think it's a career that still has a future, and
Hmm.
I think given the late developments, I'm not sure I'd encourage anybody to go into I'm not sure you'd want to go into a PhD program right now, just based on kind of how the landscape is looking. But I think the skills that you learn as a geologist are always going to be applicable to a variety of different resources, and
Hmm.
the public is certainly going to continue to use those resources.
Yeah.
And so I think the future prospects are actually pretty good.
Hmm.
It's a job that potentially pays well and involves solving puzzles. I think is part I like about it too, and or detective work is another way of saying that. So I think
Hmm.
the opportunities are still going to be there. I think it's going to take some flexibility and some
Yeah.
willingness to adapt.
Hmm. What's a skill or a trait that isn't the most common in this field, but you found has been very valuable in yourself or in people that you've worked with?
That's interesting. Um, I would say being adept with computer simulation probably. In petroleum, it's been used extensively for reservoir engineering and
Hmm.
in other fields as well. I think that's kind of the way science is going in general. And so, if I wish, if I could have actually a skill, I am. personally possess, it would probably be some combination of computer simulation and
Mhm.
statistical analysis, which is another big area that's becoming more important.
Yeah. Um, so you said earlier that you are very proud of the mentorship that you're able to have for students who are currently.
Yep.
What's a piece of advice or pieces of advice that you give to all of your mentees or ones you find would be very useful?
Well, there's not one single piece of advice. I think the primary thing actually is just to listen to them,
Yeah.
which being particularly in academics could be a very lonely position sometimes. The feeling that you're not making it and that you're an imposter and all these sorts of things. Um,
Yeah.
I think listening to them, reassuring them that everybody goes through this and that I went through this and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Um, I think oftentimes the other thing that's really important is making sure that they're aware of all the resources that are available
Yeah.
in terms of where to apply for grants and things of that nature.
Hmm.
Because as I experienced making that transition, that's not knowledge they necessarily have just starting off. And
Right.
so I think it's giving them a sense that they're going to succeed, and even if it seems like it's challenging, that they're heading in the right direction.
Hmm. How did you first get involved with mentorship?
Probably when I was graduate student, actually, I think when I was more of a senior graduate student, talking to some of the more recent people. Um, it really, I don't think kicked in big time until I got to Wisconsin, though, because I think there were obvious sort of need and opportunity.
Hmm. Um, I think that's all the questions that I have for you today.
Okay.
So, is there anything else that you would like to add that you find is really important, or just anything else that you would find of interest towards the people?
Well,
Curious.
I just want to thank you for doing the interview. And I think actually getting younger scientists involved in this kind of process is a good thing in its own right. And obviously, you've thought about these questions. And so I
Mhm.
think thanks for doing a great job with that. And I think that's about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and for all the information you've given me. I've really enjoyed this interview with you. So thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Megan.
Yeah.
Likewise.
I think you can
Now,
probably end the recording there.
now we'll go ahead and the recording. Hopefully, it actually ends.
Oh, it doesn't end whenever we.
Sorry, I find the right button. I don't want to cancel the meeting. I want to stop recording.